This is Pat Duckworth, the author of Hot Women Rock, How to Discover Your Midlife Entrepreneurial Mojo. My guest today is somebody I've been really looking forward to interviewing because normally he, and it is a he this week, is somebody who interviews other people. So I get to turn the tables and ask him some questions. So my guest is known as the Conscious Consultant, and he's a mentor, coach, speaker, healer, and serial entrepreneur. He's been in business since 1993 and has owned several successful businesses. His current ventures include the Conscious Consultant, a coaching and mentoring service which promotes sensible, ethical, moral, and conscious ways to build careers and businesses. So we definitely want to know more about that. Also Talking Alternative Broadcasting, an internet radio station which reaches over 120 countries and 300,000 listeners worldwide, and Double Diamond Wellness, a healing center in the center of Manhattan. He's inspired hundreds of people to live a life that's happier, healthier, and more fulfilled. He's lectured in several venues in New York City, so you've got the grip on where he's from now, including being a featured speaker at TEDx Upper West Side in 2016. So it's a big welcome to Sam Liebowitz. Hi, Sam. How are you today?
Hi, Pat, and I am so thrilled to be on your show. Thank you so much for inviting me to come on. And like you said, it's always fun when the tables get turned on me because I'm so used to interviewing other people.
Yeah. So I'm going to watch out in case you start asking me questions
Yeah,
instead.
you
So
never know.
I just want to start right back at the beginning. Have you always been an entrepreneur, or did your career start in a different way?
No, actually, I started very typically working at large corporations. My first couple of jobs were with large banks and financial institutions that I worked at for a number of years. And then I think my last job before I became an entrepreneur was working for a a nonprofit trade association, and I was their systems manager. So I did all kinds of IT work. But I was never really a programmer. I was more like the guy in between the programmer and the end user who kind of took all the technical stuff and turned it into real English that people could understand.
So what was the stimulus to make you set out on your own and become an entrepreneur?
Well, after 9 years of working in sort of relatively corporate settings, and seeing like I would always get in a little bit earlier, I would stay later, I would work harder than the person in the cubicle next to me. Yet somehow my paycheck didn't really reflect the effort that I was putting in. And the person in the cubicle next to me, who merely because he maybe started working there 2 years before me, was making much more money than me. And it just didn't feel fair. And I just kind of felt like I wanted to get the rewards of my own efforts. And so I had actually thought about, becoming a consultant. I became a computer consultant initially, and I'd wanted to, but I didn't know anything about it. And the interesting thing was, I was a member of this nonprofit group that was a very like pro-space advocacy group called the National Space Society. And I was talking to one of my friends in the group, and he said, "Oh, the guy John who does our newsletter? He's a computer consultant. Why don't you talk to him?" So I did. I went to talk to him, and actually, the first time I went to meet him on my lunch hour, he had a client emergency and had to run out, and I had to come back like the next day. And then I come back and I start working with him part time, like in the evenings, a couple hours, and on weekends, like one day. And I actually worked with him for almost a year before a large enough project came along that I could quit my job and just be a consultant full time. And a number of months after we worked together, he said to me, Sam, I've had dozens of people come to me asking me about how to become a consultant and wanting to work with me, but people would show up for like 2 or 3 times or maybe 1 month, and that was it. You're the only one who stuck around long enough to really do something with it. So
Oh, yeah. So what was your biggest challenge then? Or it sounds like a fairly easy transition going into that project. So were there challenges in becoming independent and an entrepreneur?
Well, the challenge was really being smart about it and
Mm,
not like jumping ship before I had that big project and making sure that like, I did have enough money. Because one of
yeah.
the big things, and when I talk to people who are transitioning from being employees to freelancers or self-employed people, is that you don't have that steadiness of income.
Mm,
And so you might get a big project and you got a lot of money in your pocket, but then it could be a while before you get that next big project. So you
mm,
really need to budget yourself and act as if you don't have a lot of money all the time
yeah.
in order to build up the reserves for when things don't go through. So it was really just kind of switching that mindset of like having a paycheck every 2 weeks to knowing that you're only getting paid when the customer says, okay, you brought me enough value and I'll pay
Yeah.
you. And even then, they didn't always pay on time. So you really had to be very conservative with costs. And that's one thing I learned early on.
Yeah. Remind me when we get to the end so we make sure that people remember that. So
Yeah.
what happened next? What was your next big job?
So I became a computer consultant. I would do desktop support and database applications development. And me and my partner John, we were both science fiction nerds, and we would go to like the Star Trek conventions and stuff. And so at the time, uh, we were looking around, and John noticed there were a lot of these bootleg tapes of Japanese animation videos, and these guys were buying them. And this was a while ago. This is before Pokemon. This is before all the kid stuff. But these weren't like kids the stuff. This was more for like high school and college kids. And so we looked at it and it's like this is an up and coming market. But we didn't know anything about doing video. We were computer guys.
Mm,
And After Dark, I don't know if anyone remembers the After Dark screensaver, with little video animations and stuff. And we thought, hey, maybe we can make like some kind of a screensaver. And CD-ROMs, and I'm really dating myself now,
yeah.
but CD-ROMs had just come out. So you could actually store video on a CD-ROM. There was enough storage for it. And so John went out and he found some companies and people, a couple of companies in the United States that had already licensed properties from Japan. We licensed the rights from them to do screensavers. We came out with the first one and it was a huge success. We went to science fiction conventions. There were a bunch of animation conventions we went to. So then we did another one and another one. I think we did four altogether. And then his brother-in-law Henry also joined us. And then we were looking at, well, what to do next. And one of the distributors who did well with our screensaver said, hey, if you guys ever come out with a video, I'll distribute that for you, and I can guarantee you a certain minimum. And so then we got into the video side of the business. And so John negotiated. I mean, I was more on the production side. He was more on like the licensing side. So he contacted some companies in Japan. Eventually we got a license. And so we started coming out with the videos. And this is back in the VHS tape days. Only we didn't really know much about how the industry worked. And we
Mm,
really got squeezed because our vendors all wanted to be paid in 30 days. But the big video distributors, they paid you in not even 90 days. They paid you in 120 days, 180 days. I mean, it was awful. And so John one day came to me and said, we can't survive this way. Um, I think I'm going to go talk to the guy who's the head of the distribution company and see if he'll buy us out. And so he did. He was able to strike a deal with this guy. We became employees of that company, but we kept the name of the company, Software Sculptors, and we kind of did stuff on our own. But after being working at that company, we realized this guy who ran this company was a complete lunatic. And within 6 months, we had already started laying the groundwork to start another video company. Thankfully, he never had to sign a non-compete agreement. And then we started another video company, and this time we knew what we were doing. We built it up from zero. I left that company. We were probably just hit our first year of doing $1 million in sales. John kept the company, and he still kind of runs it today, but that company really got beat up by the internet. He wasn't able to be nimble enough, and it's nothing near where it had been. At one point, I think he was doing 10 million in sales
yeah.
after I left. So like seeing like how to get into a company, get out of a company successfully, even if you don't make a lot of money, but you're not losing money. And so that's something that, and I had a couple of a company after that. I was in the aerospace industry in the early Web 1.0 days, and then I got into real estate. And I have to say, like my one failure, I would say, in all the businesses that I've started was in real estate, because that one I really lost my shirt on. But all the others, I may not have made a ton of money. I mean, some of them I made money. The video company, I made money, but I made a successful exit without having any debt.
Mm.
But real estate was the one thing in New York City real estate. I learned a very valuable lesson. It just happened to be very expensive. I am not built for commercial real estate in New York City. I got in at the exact wrong time, got out at the wrong time, and it really killed me. And that was what I was doing right before I started what I'm doing now.
That's really interesting because I've met so many people who are business coaches, and really they made their killing in real estate.
Mm.
And they go on to kind of coach people in business, but most of their success came in real estate. That's what gave them the platform to then kind of be teaching other people what to do. So I'm really amazed that in your instance, there was a lot of lessons to be learned, but the main lesson was don't dabble in real estate.
Well, yeah, in particular in commercial real estate in New York
Mm,
City, I can almost guarantee you that most of those coaches who made a lot of money in real estate and not in other businesses, it was not in a city as cutthroat as New York City.
yeah.
You know, this is a very tough city, and especially when it comes to commercial real estate, because so much money is involved. The type of people in general, not completely, but in general, the type of people involved are not the most ethical, moral people, which is why the conscious consultant has become a real passion of mine. Um,
Yeah, so
and I,
tell me about the conscious consultant. How did that come about?
so back when in my early days of my real estate career, when I was before I got involved in any projects, I was networking a lot, learning a lot, going to boot camps like a lot of people, and learning how to invest. And I started doing a lot of networking, and Meetup had just really come on the scene. And so I was involved with like the New York City real estate investing meetup group. And we were like one of the largest meetup groups at the time. We had over 100 people coming to our meetings every month. But I started networking a lot, and because I was networking, I got one of my friends that I met through networking invited me to one of these personal development weekends that were like free, that was just trying to upsell you to everything. But like I had been really into personal development a lot when I was in college and just after college. And I was like, oh, let me like check this stuff out again. I think I still have some old stuff. I found some old audio recordings. I started going to more of those seminars, and then I found a local group that would meet once a month to like talk about the things you learn in the seminar so as to keep it fresh. And what would happen is they would bring in a speaker who would talk about something. And most of the time it was a speaker who was presenting on some kind of workshop that they were going to do that weekend, but they were mostly around healing. And at the time, my wife is a therapist, by the way, a psychotherapist. And so what happened is I'd go to the meeting by myself, and someone would present on something like the Sedona method. I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I'd come home all excited about it. And I tell my wife about it. I'm like, oh, you want to go to the workshop this weekend with me? And so she was very open because she was a therapist, and we'd go together and I'd learn some healing modality. And then another one, and then another one, and then another one. And I wasn't really learning all these modalities to become a healer. It was more for my own healing.
Mm.
But then there was this one modality that was a form of instant energetic healing. And I went to the first weekend workshop, and they asked a second day, they asked for volunteers to come up to demonstrate. And I was really working on building my intuition at the time. And it was a very intuitive modality that a lot of people in the class just weren't getting it. And I think I got it, but I wasn't sure. So I raised my hand. This woman raises her hand, and she says, you know, oh, I feel all congested. I think I'm coming down with a cold or the flu. I'd love someone to work on me. So I work on her using this method, 5 minutes tops, a really very quick, fast method. And I finished, and I was like, how do you feel? And she looks at me with these big eyes and goes, oh my God, I can breathe. I'm like, oh, that's good. She goes, no, 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 listen. She takes this deep breath. Ah, you hear that? There's no congestion. I go, oh, that's wonderful. She goes, no, 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 you don't understand. I've had chronic bronchitis since I was 6 years old in South Africa. I haven't been able to breathe like this since I was a little kid. And I was like, oh, wow, oh. And it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, like, oh, I'm learning all this stuff. It's not just for me. I can actually use this to help people. And so I go home that night and I'm talking with my wife about it. I'm trying to figure out, what do I do with this? I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not a healer. What do you do with this kind of thing? And that's when I kind of got this inspiration. Well, I was kind of a business consultant. I was mentoring people. I was coaching people already. I'm still kind of a consultant. I'm just a different kind of consultant. And so that's how I kind of got into this world, and really started studying with some spiritual teachers after that, and really had my feet very firmly planted on my spiritual path after that. And that was probably 15 years ago.
Wow, fantastic. So this is Pat Duckworth, and today I'm talking to Sam Liebowitz in New York. And Sam, I always ask this question about purpose, because our purpose is so important to guiding us forward through our careers. So what would sum up your purpose for you? What is your reason to do what you do now?
It's so interesting because I've been running my internet radio station, talkradio.nyc, for 10 years now, and I have all kinds of shows come on. And I had this one show on in the past called Dudes of Disruption. There were these three guys who were coaches, professional coaches, life coaches, and they did this one show on knowing your higher purpose.
Mm.
And I was engineering the show, and it was so interesting because as soon as they started talking about it, I like knew what my higher purpose was, and that was to help with the unfoldment of consciousness on the planet. In other words, to help raise awareness among people. And and I look at like everything that I was doing at the time, and it was all about that. I mean, I was doing different things, but that was really the core to it.
And I can see that running through all your businesses now, which is fantastic. And people discover their purpose in so many different ways. Sometimes when I'm working with clients, they've known since they were a child what they wanted to do. And for other people, it's a real unfolding. But once they get it, just that path becomes so much clearer. And I can see, over the course of your careers, you've built up this real portfolio of capabilities, from the technical into the networking into managing finances. How have you kept developing and growing your entrepreneurial skills?
Well, I keep trying new things. It's kind of funny because there's sometimes things that I learned in the past, like things I learned about managing your accounts when I was working back for banks early in my career, that I end up using much later on. And so it's you're always kind of working on yourself. A
Mm.
friend of mine likes to say it's the lifelong PhD.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in doing the deep inner work. I have a shamanic practice that I'm training in to be a facilitator that is very near and dear to my heart, and it really takes me inside. And then just you're always, just to keep up. And today the world is changing so fast. You really need to pay attention and stay involved. I just have that attitude. I mean, I hang out with people who are 20 years younger than me, and I don't feel any difference between us, even though they may be of a different generation than I am. I hear people talk about millennials. I get along great with millennials. Um, and I've always been interested, as I mentioned earlier, like in science fiction and in the futuristic stuff. And to me, I'm always like, this technology, oh, this is low tech. This is low tech. When are we going to get some real high tech stuff?
When are we getting our jetpacks so that we don't have to drive around in cars? That's what I'm waiting for.
Jetpack, forget it. I want the transporter already.
Oh, yeah.
Where's my personal force field and my tricorder?
So just going back to what you said about all these skills that we develop. My last job in public service was as a director of corporate governance, and you might think, how does that relate to the kind of therapy and coaching work I do now? But in that, I learned about risk management.
Mm,
And I teach people who worry and feel anxious risk management so that
mm.
they can do something positive with the worry. They can learn how to actually assess whether they should be worried about something or not. So something that seems completely unrelated shifts into the next thing you're doing. So never neglect the skills that you're building up.
Yeah.
So
So Pat, you want to hear a nice synchronicity? You remember that I told you my last job working for somebody else was a trade association? It was a trade association called Risk Insurance Management Society. It was a trade association for basically insurance buyers that were all about how to manage risk. I mean, I was just taking care of the computers. I wasn't involved in the risk stuff. But when you're at a place, you get exposed to stuff. So that's kind of funny.
yeah, you just absorb this stuff. So what does success mean to you now?
Well, today I have a very different view of success than I've had in the past. Because for me, success is not about money.
Mm.
And you know what? It's not even about influence. I know some people look at it as influence or power. To me, success is showing up with real presence in whatever I'm doing at the time. It's about how I show up. It's not about the external reward. I feel successful when I know like I've shown up fully and completely and I've really given my heart and all of my being to what I'm working on in the moment and being very present with whoever I happen to be at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I'm feeling you present with me now. So if you have some top tips for new entrepreneurs, what would you say to them?
Top tips for new entrepreneurs. Well, number one, you got to keep a really tight handle on costs because you can spend your way out of business faster than anything else. You stay flexible because we live in a world that's changing by the minute. So you really got to stay flexible and keep an eye on the trends, not just what's happening today, but where are things going for the future. Uh, and actually, they say now that more and more people are going to have to become entrepreneurs because of the economic environment that we're in. To me, it's a humongous opportunity. Don't get a swelled head about it. Look for a real need. It's an underserved market, something that people need that nobody is doing for them. And you fill that need with lots of value. Always give more value than you're charging, and you will have loyal customers for the rest of your life.
Fantastic advice. And we're seeing people stepping into all different sorts of roles, things that there was never a need for before. What I'm seeing at the moment is sort of bespoke and specialized face masks. You know, people
Mm,
making them from different fabrics that women like, or making fun ones for younger.
yeah.
Who would have thought that would have been a thing at the beginning of the year? So, Sam, people watching, if they want to find out more about you, how do they do that?
So my website is theconsciousconsultant.com, and you can reach me there. There's a contact form, or you can email me at sam@theconsciousconsultant.com. And if you want to catch my radio show or my podcast, it's on talkradio.nyc. It's called The Conscious Consultant Hour, and it airs every Thursday at 12 noon New York City time. So you have to adjust it for whatever time you're at.
Yeah, and you've had so many great guests on it. As you know, sometimes I tune in when you're live if my work for the day is done and I can catch you talking on that.
Always
And
appreciate it. And may I give an example of being flexible with times?
mm,
So the radio network we used to do in studio here in New York City, and all my guests, all my hosts of the different shows on the network were all local.
yeah,
But because of the lockdown, I had to turn it virtual. But now I use Zoom and I use other things to be able to stream it out live. So now people can host shows on my network from all over the world. So I'm no longer limited. So this crisis actually turned into a great opportunity to me because now I have people coming to me from all over the place wanting to do shows on the network. So we're no longer a New York City only radio station.
yeah, fantastic. What's next for you, Sam? What's new and in the pipeline? What can you share?
Well, actually, I have a book coming out.
Oh,
I basically have I write a blog every week for our newsletter, and I've been getting a lot of compliments on some of the things I write about. And so I've been working with an editor to compile it and chop it down and fix the grammar and everything else. And we finally have decided on a title. It's called Everyday Awakening. You Are More Powerful Than You Know.
love it.
And I'm planning to launch it in September. I haven't selected an actual date just yet, but we're getting close to finishing up on the manuscript, and I'm really excited. It's my first book, and
Really looking forward to it. Can't wait to see a copy of that. And there's nothing like that moment when you open your first box of books and the smell of new books comes out. You're going to love that moment.
yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait.
Thank you so much. So, what have we learned today? We've learned that it's really important to keep an eye on your cash flow. Sometimes you don't get paid for several months, and you have to build that into your planning and think about your clients and when they're likely to pay you if money is a real issue for you. Also, being flexible, carrying on your learning and development. The way to stay young is to keep learning. If you keep learning, you can stay in touch with everything that's going on, and nobody feels like they're a different generation to you. Thank you so much, Sam. It's been such a joy to have you today.
It's been a pleasure being on your show, Pat. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to getting you on the Conscious Consultant Hour before too long, though I'm pretty
Oh,
booked out with guests right now.
well, that would be fantastic. So, to all of our viewers, thank you for watching, and keep on watching out for more of these interviews with amazing entrepreneurs. I'll see you next time.